They told everyone you were nothing special. They laughed at your dreams, dismissed your emotions, mocked your depth, and walked away as if losing you meant nothing. They made you question your own value. They convinced you that you were too sensitive, too intense, too different, too much. But now something has changed. The same people who once looked down on you are quietly watching you. The same mouths that dismissed your name are whispering it when you are not around. The same people who thought you would stay broken are realizing that you rebuilt yourself without them. You became stronger in the silence they thought would destroy you. You learned to stop explaining yourself. You stopped chasing validation. You stopped begging people to recognize your worth. And that silence became your power. Because when you stopped giving them access to your energy, they finally had to confront the emptiness they created. They expected you to keep reaching for them. They expected you to prove yourself. They expected you to remain available. Instead, you disappeared into your own growth, and that is when everything changed. They once laughed at your light. Now they cannot stop looking at it. They mocked your confidence, but now they notice every move you make. They called your peace boring, but now your calmness is something they cannot understand. They called your boundaries arrogance, but now they realize those boundaries were protecting something valuable. They called your kindness weakness, but now they see that you survived things that would have broken them. What they misunderstood about you has become the very thing they cannot forget. And here is the part they never expected. You did not become powerful by becoming cruel. You became powerful by becoming unavailable to what drained you. You stopped fighting every battle. You stopped responding to every accusation. You stopped explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. You discovered that not every person deserves access to your thoughts, your emotions, your attention, or your future. That is why your silence feels so loud now. They may never admit it publicly, but your absence forced them to notice your presence. They notice when you stop posting. They notice when you stop reacting. They notice when you stop checking for them. They notice when your energy changes. And the more you detach, the more they realize they can no longer control your attention. You are no longer waiting for their approval. You are no longer standing where they left you. You are moving forward, and they can feel the difference. They thought they could replace your presence, but they eventually discovered that not every connection can be duplicated. Not every person carries the same depth. Not every heart loves with the same sincerity. Not every soul brings the same kind of perspective into someone's life. They may meet new people, create new memories, and pretend everything is normal. But certain connections leave lessons behind that cannot simply be erased. You were never meant to spend your life convincing someone that you mattered. Your worth existed before they recognized it. Your purpose existed before they supported it. Your light existed before they applauded it. And your future does not depend on whether someone from your past finally understands what they lost. So let them watch from a distance. Let them wonder how you became so calm. Let them question why you no longer react the way you used to. Let them notice the glow they once tried to dim. You do not need revenge. Your growth is enough. You do not need to expose them. Time has a way of revealing what people tried to hide. You do not need to chase closure. Sometimes closure is simply realizing that you survived what once convinced you that you couldn't. They laughed at your light because they did not understand it. They underestimated your resilience because they only saw the version of you that was struggling. They never imagined what would happen when you finally stopped fighting yourself and started believing in who you were becoming. Now you are different. Your standards are different. Your mindset is different. Your energy is different. Your priorities are different. You are no longer desperate to be understood by everyone. You are focused on becoming someone you can respect when nobody is watching. And that is what makes your transformation so powerful. The person they dismissed is no longer standing at the same door, waiting to be chosen. You are building your own door. You are creating your own path. You are becoming the person you once needed when life felt impossible. And every step forward proves that their old opinion of you was never your destiny. So, chosen one, don't go backward just because someone finally noticed your value. Don't reopen doors simply because someone regrets closing them. Don't confuse someone's curiosity with genuine transformation. Watch actions, not words. Protect your peace. Protect your purpose. And most importantly, never shrink yourself again just to make someone else comfortable. They laughed at your light. Now let your life speak so loudly that you never have to explain it again. Your silence is not weakness. Your distance is not defeat. Your growth is not an accident. And your light was never theirs to turn off. Keep rising, keep building, keep becoming, because the strongest version of you is not the person they lost. It is the person you are becoming without them. They used to downplay your presence. Now they study your every move like they are trying to understand something they can no longer control. Because here is the truth. Chosen one, your light does not need to be loud to be powerful. It does not beg for attention. It does not chase approval. It simply exists, and somehow that existence became unforgettable. The more you stopped explaining yourself, the more they started wondering about you. The more you healed privately, the more your transformation became impossible to ignore. You became powerful the moment you stopped performing for people who had already decided to misunderstand you. You stopped proving your heart. You stopped defending your character. You stopped arguing with people committed to seeing you through an old version of yourself. And that shift changed everything. Your peace became louder than your arguments. Your silence became stronger than your explanations. Your consistency became undeniable evidence that you were never what they claimed you were. The people who once laughed at your sensitivity now recognize it as discernment. The people who called you too deep now realize that depth was your strength. The people who dismissed your boundaries now understand that your boundaries were never punishment, they were protection. They thought they could manipulate the version of you who constantly questioned yourself. But that version is gone. You learned, you healed, you became aware. And now the access they once had is no longer available. That is what makes your transformation so powerful. You did not become someone else. You finally became fully yourself. And that is difficult for people to process when they benefited from the version of you who had not, yet discovered their own worth. They remember when you tolerated disrespect. They remember when you explained yourself for hours. They remember when you chased closure. They remember when their approval mattered to you. But now they are looking at someone who no longer needs permission to walk away. You became the proof that their old opinion of you was wrong, and they can feel it. Your growth is not just about appearance, success, money, attention, or accomplishments. The real transformation happened internally. You stopped needing everyone to understand you. You stopped measuring your worth through other people's reactions. You learned to protect your peace, even when people misunderstood your silence. You learned that sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. That is why your presence feels different now. You are not trying to be impressive. You are becoming undeniable. And that difference changes everything. People who once thought they were immune to your energy may suddenly become curious about your life. They may check your updates, notice your absence, wonder what changed, or quietly compare who you are now to who you used to be. But whether they are watching or not is no longer the point. Your life cannot be built around who is paying attention. Let them watch if they want to watch. Let them wonder. Let them misunderstand. You do not need to interrupt your growth to explain it. Because the moment you start living for your own purpose, you stop being controlled by other people's opinions, and this is where the real shift begins. The people who once dismissed you may eventually realize that what they called too much was actually your depth. What they called weakness was sensitivity combined with strength. What they called arrogance was confidence. They were not prepared to understand. What they called distance was discernment. What they called your downfall was actually the beginning of your transformation. You did not simply level up. You outgrew the environment that required you to stay small. History is filled with people who were doubted before their ideas were respected, criticized before their voices were valued, and misunderstood before their impact became undeniable. The lesson is not that everyone who doubts you will eventually worship you. The lesson is much more important. You do not need their approval to become who you were meant to become. Your power does not come from proving people wrong. Your power comes from refusing to abandon yourself just because someone else failed to recognize you. And if you have felt a strange shift lately, don't immediately turn every coincidence, dream, song, or feeling into proof that someone is secretly obsessed with you. Sometimes your mind is simply processing memories, emotions, and unfinished experiences. What matters is not decoding every sign. What matters is what you choose to do with your attention. Bring your energy back to yourself. That is the real victory. Because you do not need to know who is watching you. You need to know where you are going. You do not need to know who regrets losing you. You need to make sure you never lose yourself again. You do not need to know who is talking about you. You need to keep building a life that makes their opinions irrelevant. And you definitely do not need to chase someone who suddenly becomes interested after realizing your value. Watch their actions, protect your standards, trust consistency, because words can change overnight. Character does not. And now, chosen one, we come to the second revelation. The truth they tried to hide is becoming impossible to ignore. They may have stayed silent. They may have pretended nothing happened. They may have acted completely unbothered. But silence does not erase history. Avoidance does not erase consequences. And pretending you never mattered does not change the impact a connection once had. Eventually, reality catches up with every story people tell themselves. The mask becomes heavy. The performance becomes exhausting, and the truth starts appearing through the smallest things, the hesitation in their voice, the sudden change of subject, the uncomfortable silence when your name comes up, the way certain memories still affect them. But remember this, you don't need to become obsessed with their reaction. That would only give them the power you worked so hard to reclaim. Your mission is not to monitor their emotions. Your mission is to master your own. Let them process what they need to process. Let them face their choices. Let them live with whatever lessons their decisions created. You have somewhere else to be. Forward. Because the strongest form of closure is not watching someone regret losing you. It is reaching the point where their regret no longer matters. You were the person they underestimated. You became the person they could no longer ignore. But most importantly, you became the person you can finally believe in, so keep your head high. Keep your boundaries strong. Keep your heart protected without making it bitter. Keep your light alive without needing an audience. Because your greatest comeback is not making them jealous. Your greatest comeback is becoming so deeply aligned with your purpose that you no longer need anyone from your past to validate your future. They may remember the old you. They may question the new you. They may even wonder how you changed so completely, but you know the truth. You didn't become someone new. You simply stopped hiding who you always were. And now they can see it, not because you demanded their attention, not because you chased them, not because you proved anything, but because you finally learned how to stand in your own light and never apologize for shining. They thought they could erase your impact by staying silent. They thought if they never mentioned your name, never admitted they missed you, and never acknowledged what happened, eventually the memory of you would disappear. But truth has a way of surfacing when people spend too long pretending. The people they trusted begin noticing the cracks. Someone casually mentions your name and suddenly the room gets quiet. Someone brings up your success and their expression changes. Someone asks how you are doing and they suddenly have nothing to say. They may control their words, but they cannot always control their reactions. Because what they tried to bury was never truly buried. Every memory they pushed away became another reminder waiting for the right moment to return. Every feeling they refused to acknowledge became heavier. Every opportunity they had to treat you with respect but chose ego instead became another chapter. They eventually had to confront. They thought they were walking away from you, but in reality, they were walking away from a version of themselves that had the opportunity to grow. And now the past keeps showing up in unexpected ways: a familiar song, an old message, a photograph, a mutual friend, a place you once shared, a phrase that sounds exactly like something you used to say. None of these things need to be supernatural signs to carry meaning. Sometimes they are simply reminders that the human mind does not erase meaningful experiences on command. You can move forward while still remembering what mattered. That is why pretending to be unaffected can become exhausting. Pride says, "I'm fine." Memory says, "But remember." Ego says, "It meant nothing." Reality says, "Then why does it still affect you?" And that internal conflict is where regret begins. They may never publicly confess what they feel. They may continue posting, smiling, socializing, and acting completely unaffected. But you do not need to decode every post or analyze every silence. Their emotional journey is theirs to carry. Your responsibility is not to monitor their regret. Your responsibility is to protect the peace you fought so hard to find. Because here is the real lesson. You were never replaceable because your value was never based on being compared to someone else. They may meet new people, they may build new relationships, they may surround themselves with distractions, but no person can perfectly recreate another human being. Every connection is different. Every personality is different. Every bond carries its own history. Trying to replace someone is often nothing more than avoiding the lesson that connection was meant to teach. They may search for your softness in someone else, your wisdom in someone else, your humor in someone else, your patience in someone else, your energy in someone else. But what they are really searching for is familiarity, the feeling they experienced when they were around you. And familiarity cannot be duplicated. They can recreate the environment. They cannot recreate you. But chosen one, don't let that become your reason to wait. Don't sit around hoping someone realizes what they lost. Don't pause your life waiting for an apology. Don't measure your worth by whether someone regrets leaving. Your life becomes powerful when you stop needing their regret to validate your value. Let them learn whatever they need to learn. You keep moving, because while they may be looking backward, your future is calling you forward. Number 4, your absence feels different because you stopped giving away what used to be freely available. You were consistent, you were present, you gave attention, you listened, you cared, you showed up. They may have mistaken that consistency for something permanent. They assumed you would always be there, always respond, always forgive, always make the first move. Then one day, you stopped. Not dramatically, not with a public announcement, not with revenge. You simply stopped knocking on a door that had already shown you it was not going to open. And that silence changed the entire dynamic. They no longer receive the same attention. They no longer know what you're thinking. They no longer have automatic access to your emotions. They cannot predict your next move because you are no longer moving according to their expectations. That is not punishment, that is a boundary. And sometimes the most powerful boundary is simply refusing to participate in the same cycle anymore. Your absence may remind someone of what they took for granted, but your goal should never be to make them suffer. Your goal is to stop suffering yourself. You don't need to make them jealous. You don't need to post for them. You don't need to disappear just to make someone chase you. You simply need to live. Live peacefully. Live honestly. Live fully. And if someone notices your absence, that is their realization to carry. You stopped chasing because you finally understood something profound. You cannot convince someone to value what they are determined to take for granted, and that realization is freedom. Now let's talk about your rise. Number 5, the more you rise, the less their old version of you makes sense. They remember the person who was uncertain. They remember the person who doubted themselves. They remember the person who tolerated things they would never tolerate today. And then they see you now, calmer, stronger, focused, disciplined, more confident, more selective, more peaceful. You didn't announce your comeback. You didn't need to. Your life became the announcement. Every achievement became evidence. Every boundary became evidence. Every peaceful morning became evidence. Every time you chose yourself became evidence. And perhaps the most powerful part is that you did not need revenge to prove that they were wrong. You simply kept going. You healed without their permission. You grew without their approval. You rebuilt without their assistance. You smiled without their validation. And eventually you realized that the greatest comeback was never making them regret losing you. It was becoming someone who no longer needed to be found by them. Your glow-up is not their punishment. Your peace is not their downfall. Your success is not a weapon. It is your freedom. And that is far more powerful. Because when you stop building your life around proving people wrong, you become impossible to control through their opinions. They can doubt you, you keep building. They can misunderstand you, you keep growing. They can remember the old you keep becoming the new you. They can talk about your past. You keep creating your future. And one day you will look back and realize that the person you were desperately trying to make them recognize was never the final version of you. You were still becoming, you were still learning, you were still healing. You were still discovering your strength. And now you finally understand why that chapter had to end. It wasn't because you were not enough. It was because you were becoming too aware to keep accepting less. So don't break your silence just because someone suddenly becomes curious. Don't reopen a door simply because someone finally notices it is closed. Don't confuse regret with change. Don't confuse attention with love. Don't confuse nostalgia with accountability. Watch actions, watch consistency, watch character. And most importantly, watch what happens when you stop abandoning yourself for people who never knew how to value you, because the real victory is not that they miss you. The real victory is that you no longer miss the version of yourself who tolerated being undervalued. They may have thought they were leaving you behind. But the truth is, you were leaving behind everything that kept you small. And now there is no going back. You are not chasing, you are not begging, you are not proving. You are becoming, and the life ahead of you is bigger than the people who could only recognize your worth after they lost access to it. What they didn't realize was that your healing was never about proving anything to them. It happened quietly, internally, in the places nobody could see. While they were watching for your reaction, you were rebuilding your identity. While they expected you to remain hurt, you were learning how to stand without needing anyone's approval. Every win, every peaceful moment, every new chapter, every change in your life became evidence of one undeniable truth. You were never dependent on them for your light. They were simply present during a chapter of your life that taught you how to find it. And that truth can be difficult for people to accept, because when someone believes they had power over you, your healing becomes the ultimate contradiction. They expected your life to shrink after they left. Instead, you expanded. They expected you to chase. Instead, you detached. They expected you to remain available. Instead, you became selective with your energy. They expected your story to end where they walked away. Instead, that moment became the beginning of a completely different version of you. So let them wonder. Let them question how you changed. Let them notice the confidence in your presence, the peace in your silence, and the strength behind your decisions. You do not need to shrink yourself to protect someone else's pride. Their discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility. Your purpose is not to make other people comfortable with your transformation. Chosen ones do not rise simply to prove people wrong. They rise because they finally refuse to betray themselves. And when you begin walking in that kind of alignment, people who once underestimated you may suddenly realize that they were looking at your potential through the wrong lens. Number 6, they tried to destroy your peace. But your healing became stronger than their negativity. Maybe they talked about you. Maybe they spread rumors. Maybe they judged you, misunderstood you, or tried to make you question yourself. But none of that could permanently destroy something you rebuilt from within. The strongest protection you developed was not revenge, it was emotional clarity. You learned that you don't have to fight every rumor. You don't have to answer every accusation. You don't have to expose everyone who hurt you. Sometimes the strongest response is simply continuing to live well, because negativity loses its power when you stop feeding it with your attention. They may have expected you to become bitter. Instead, you became wiser. They expected anger. You developed boundaries. They expected chaos. You chose peace. They expected you to fall apart. You became more disciplined, and that is the transformation they cannot control. You don't need to believe that every negative thought someone sends your way becomes some mystical force following you. Protecting your peace is much more powerful than living in fear of other people's intentions. Your attention is valuable, and you get to decide where it goes. So don't waste your energy wondering who secretly envies you. Build. Don't spend your nights trying to decode who is watching you grow. Don't become obsessed with proving who was wrong. Become undeniable to yourself, because your greatest protection is not fear, it is clarity. And the moment you understand that, you become difficult to manipulate. Number 7. You moved forward while they remained trapped in the version of you that no longer exists. You evolved, they remembered, you healed. They replayed, you continued your life. They remained attached to an old chapter, and that difference matters. Some people never update their perception of you. They continue seeing the person you were years ago because accepting your growth would force them to admit that they underestimated you. But you are not obligated to remain who someone remembers. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to outgrow old relationships. You are allowed to become more selective. You are allowed to become quieter. You are allowed to become stronger. And you are absolutely allowed to stop returning to places where you had to beg to be respected. They may remember the moment they rejected you, ignored you, ghosted you, or treated you as though you were replaceable. But you don't have to keep replaying that moment. You can take the lesson and leave the pain behind. Because nostalgia is not a reason to go backward. You are building a life in the present, and your future does not need permission from your past. They may search for the old version of you in your new life, but they will not find them. That person is gone, not because they were destroyed, because they evolve. Number 8. Their pride may fight what their emotions want to acknowledge. Some people would rather protect their pride than admit they were wrong. They may act cold. They may pretend they don't care. They may avoid difficult conversations because admitting the truth would require accountability. But here's what matters. You don't need to win that internal battle for them. Let them figure themselves out. If they regret something, let them process it. If they miss something, let them sit with it. If they finally understand your value, let that realization belong to them. Your job is not to rescue someone from the consequences of their own decisions. You are not responsible for making their confusion disappear. You are responsible for protecting your peace, and that is where your power lives. Because once you stop trying to convince someone to understand you, their misunderstanding loses its ability to control your emotions. They can say you're different, you know you are. They can say you've changed, you know you have. They can wonder why you no longer respond the same way. You know the answer. You learned your worth. And when someone truly learns their worth, they stop negotiating with disrespect. Number 9. The very traits they mocked became the traits that made you unforgettable. They called you too emotional, but your emotional depth became empathy. They called you too deep, but your depth became wisdom. They called your intuition paranoia, but your awareness taught you to recognize patterns. They called your softness weakness. But your softness survived without becoming bitterness. They called your standards impossible. But your standards protected you from accepting what once wounded you. They called your silence strange. But your silence became discipline. They called your confidence arrogance. But your confidence became self-respect. Do you see what happened? They were judging qualities they did not yet understand. What they considered flaws became the foundation of your growth. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson in this entire journey. You were never too much. You were simply giving your depth to people who only knew how to live on the surface. So stop editing yourself to fit into someone else's limited perception. Stop apologizing for being thoughtful. Stop apologizing for having boundaries. Stop apologizing for wanting something meaningful. Stop apologizing for protecting your peace. Stop apologizing for becoming someone your past cannot recognize. Your light does not need everyone's permission. Your healing does not need everyone's approval. Your future does not require everyone's understanding. Keep becoming. Keep rising. Keep choosing yourself. Because one day, the same qualities you were criticized for may become the exact qualities you are most grateful you never abandoned. And when that day comes, you won't be standing there waiting for someone to say, "I was wrong." You will simply look at the life you built and realize, I was never waiting for them to recognize me. I was learning how to recognize myself. That is the real transformation. That is the real victory. And that is why you keep moving forward. What they called your sensitivity was never weakness. It was awareness. It was the part of you that noticed what other people ignored, felt what others dismissed, and recognized patterns before they became obvious. They may have called you unstable because they did not understand your emotional depth. But that same sensitivity taught you when something was wrong. It helped you recognize manipulation, unhealthy patterns, and relationships that were slowly draining your peace. You were not too much. You were simply becoming too aware to keep accepting what once felt normal. And the spiritual side of you that they mocked became another part of your strength. You learned to listen to your intuition without allowing fear to control you. You learned to step back when something felt wrong. You learned that peace is not boring and boundaries are not cruelty. Your calmness became a form of power because you no longer needed chaos to feel alive. They may have wanted the old version of you, the version that questioned themselves, over-explained, tolerated disrespect, and constantly tried to prove their intentions. But that person is no longer available. You changed the moment you stopped asking, "How can I make them understand me?" and started asking, "Why am I still trying to convince someone who has already shown me who they are?" That question can change an entire life. The qualities they once criticized became the qualities that helped you escape what was hurting you. Your sensitivity became discernment. Your depth became wisdom. Your softness became compassion with boundaries. Your silence became self-control. Your standards became protection, and your intuition became the voice you finally stopped ignoring. So stop wondering whether you were too much. Maybe you were simply giving something profound to people who were only prepared for something convenient. Number 10, people around them may notice the difference, but you don't need their confirmation. When someone is struggling emotionally, the people closest to them often notice changes in mood, behavior, attention, and communication. They may notice that someone becomes quiet when a particular topic comes up. They may notice that certain memories still carry emotional weight. They may notice hesitation, distraction, or a sudden change in energy. But chosen one, don't turn every glance, post, dream, or coincidence into evidence that someone is secretly obsessed with you. You don't need to investigate another person's emotions to prove that you mattered. You already know you mattered because you experienced the connection yourself. And if someone still thinks about you, that is their business. If they regret something, that is their lesson. If they miss you, that is their feeling. You don't have to carry it. Your healing becomes stronger when you stop monitoring people who are no longer part of your daily life. Every minute spent decoding someone else's behavior is a minute taken away from your own future. So let them have their emotions. You have your life, and your life deserves your attention. Maybe the people around them have noticed a shift. Maybe they haven't. Either way, it does not change your direction. You don't need witnesses to validate your transformation. You need consistency. Number 11. You were never an upgrade because someone else was a downgrade. You were valuable because of who you are. This is important. Don't build your confidence around the idea that someone chose another person and later discovered that you were better. Your worth does not require another person to lose something before they understand it. You were valuable before they left. You were valuable while they misunderstood you. You were valuable when they ignored you. You were valuable when they chose something else. And you are valuable now. Maybe they chose comfort over honesty. Maybe they chose familiarity over growth. Maybe they chose something that required less vulnerability. Sometimes people choose what feels easier rather than what challenges them to become better. But that decision belongs to them. Your responsibility is not to compete with whoever came after you. Your responsibility is to become the strongest, healthiest, most authentic version of yourself. Because real love should not require you to prove that you are superior to someone else. Real connection should not be a competition. Real growth should not depend on someone else's regret. And real self-worth does not disappear because somebody failed to recognize it. You don't need to be the one they should have chosen. You need to become the one you choose every single day. That is the upgrade, not the clothes, not the attention, not the glow-up, not the number of people watching. The upgrade is your mindset, your boundaries, your standards, your emotional maturity, your ability to walk away from what once had control over you, your ability to choose peace without feeling guilty. That is the version of you nobody can take away. Number 12. You became unforgettable because the experience changed you. Maybe you were an important chapter in someone's life. Maybe you challenged them, encouraged them, loved them, or showed them a side of themselves they had never confronted before. But don't romanticize every painful connection as something the universe hand-picked for you. Sometimes people enter our lives because there is something to learn. Sometimes they stay. Sometimes they leave. Sometimes the greatest lesson is learning when to stop holding on. You don't have to believe that another person is spiritually bound to you forever to understand that an experience can leave a permanent mark. You can honor what happened without returning to it. You can appreciate what you learned without reopening the wound. You can remember someone without waiting for them. And you can love the lesson while releasing the attachment. That is maturity. That is freedom. That is healing. They may remember your laugh. They may remember your presence. They may remember conversations that changed something inside them. They may even look back and wish they had handled things differently. But your story does not end with their regret. Your story continues with your growth, your peace, your purpose, your future. So let them remember, let them reflect, let them learn. You do not have to chase their realization. You do not have to wait for an apology. You do not have to stand at the same door hoping someone finally knocks. You have already walked through it, and the person walking forward is not the same person who entered that relationship. You are wiser now. You are stronger now. You are more selective now. You understand your worth differently now. And perhaps the most powerful truth is this: they did not make you unforgettable. Your authenticity did. They did not create your light. They simply failed to recognize it. They did not give you your strength. You discovered it. They did not give you your purpose. You found it. And they certainly do not get to decide what happens next, so keep your head high. Don't chase. Don't prove. Don't compare. Don't monitor. Don't return to environments that required you to become smaller just to belong. Keep building. Keep healing. Keep becoming, because one day you will stop caring whether they regret losing you. And that will be the moment you realize you finally won, not because they lost you, but because you stopped losing yourself. Your silence didn't bury your story. Your pain didn't destroy your future. Their rejection didn't define your worth. Their misunderstanding didn't change your identity. It all became part of the road that led you back to yourself. And now you are walking forward with something they could never give you. Peace that does not depend on anyone staying. That is your real glow-up. That is your real power. Chosen one, before you leave this message, remember this: the people who underestimated you do not get to define the ending of your story. You survived the chapter they thought would break you, and you became stronger because of it. Your silence is no longer emptiness. It is evidence that you have finally stopped giving your power away. Keep walking forward, because the life waiting for you is bigger than the people you had to leave behind. And if someone from your past is still thinking about you, wondering about you, or regretting how they treated you, let them have that realization. You don't need to turn around. You don't need to investigate. You don't need their confession. Your growth already said everything that needed to be said. The strongest response is becoming so at peace with yourself that their opinion can no longer disturb your direction. So ask yourself one final question. What if the rejection that hurt you was actually the moment that redirected you toward the life you were always meant to build? What if losing access to certain people was not your downfall, but the beginning of your freedom? Sometimes the door that closes behind you is the exact door that forces you to discover how far you can go on your own. Remember this: when you feel tempted to look backward, you are not the person they left behind. You are wiser, stronger, more aware, and more protective of your peace. You don't need to return to prove that you changed. You don't need to make them regret anything. Keep becoming the version of yourself that no longer needs validation from the people who once made you question your worth. And finally, chosen one, don't let anyone's regret become your destination. Let it remain their lesson while you continue building your future. Your story is not about who lost you. It is about who you became after you stopped begging to be valued. So keep your heart strong, keep your standards high, keep your faith steady, and keep moving forward, because the best chapter of your life may be the one you haven't even reached yet.